shattered glass. The key made the familiar click in the lock, but nothing else about coming home felt familiar to Prisha. After 3 weeks at a writing retreat in the mountains, she expected to find Vikram waiting with his usual distracted half-smile, asking about her trip while his mind wandered back to work. Instead, she found unfamiliar shoes in the entryway, delicate-heeled sandals where her practical flats once stood. "Vikram?" Prisha called, wheeling her suitcase into the living room where nothing looked right. The throw pillows had been rearranged. A jacket she'd never seen hung over the back of the sofa. The scent of an unfamiliar perfume hung in the air. "Oh, you're back early." Vikram appeared from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, his expression caught between surprise and guilt. "I'm not early. This is exactly when I said I'd be home." Prisha's voice remained steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Whose shoes are those?" Before Vikram could answer, a woman appeared behind him. Tall, willowy, with shining black hair cascading over her shoulders. She couldn't have been more than 25. She placed a possessive hand on Vikram's shoulder. "You must be Prisha. I'm Tanya." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Vikram said you'd be gone until tomorrow." 7 years of marriage crystallized into this single shattering moment. The signs had been there, the late nights, the emotional distance, the business trips that seemed to multiply. But this, finding another woman so completely installed in her home, was beyond anything Prisha had imagined. "I see." Prisha's voice remained remarkably calm. "And how long has this been going on?" "Prisha, let's talk about this privately," Vikram attempted, moving toward her. 4 months, Tanya answered, her chin lifting slightly. "Vikram said you two were practically separated already." Prisha looked at her husband of 7 years. The man she'd supported through business school, whose dreams she'd helped build. "Were we? That's news to me." "I tried to tell you we needed space," Vikram said, his voice dropping to that reasonable tone he used when explaining things he considered beyond her understanding. "Remember before your retreat? I said things weren't working. You said you needed space to think. Not that you'd already replaced me." Prisha placed her house keys on the coffee table with a soft click. "I'll get a hotel tonight." 3 days later, Prisha stood on the porch of the vacant house next door. The realtor looked uncomfortable. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Sharma? Most clients in your situation prefer something farther away." Prisha signed the rental agreement with a steady hand. "I'm not most clients, and it's Ms. Malhotra now. I'm reverting to my maiden name." That evening, as the moving truck delivered the few things she'd taken from her former home, Prisha caught Vikram watching from his living room window. Tanya pulled him away, the curtains closing with a decisive swish. Prisha turned away and continued unpacking her books. She placed her laptop on the small desk by the window, opening a new document titled The Glass House. The cursor blinked expectantly. "I didn't disappear," she typed. "I moved next door. Sometimes the only way through heartbreak is to walk toward it, not away." She glanced out her window toward the house that was no longer hers. For 7 years, she'd lived in Vikram's shadow. Now she would live in her own light, right where they could see it shine. Reflections. The morning sunlight filtered through the newly hung curtains in Prisha's bedroom, casting dappled patterns across her journal. 3 weeks had passed since she'd moved next door to her old life. 3 weeks of reinvention. Day 22, she wrote. "I finally slept through the night without waking to phantom sounds of Vikram coming home late." A knock at the door interrupted her writing. Prisha wrapped her cardigan around herself and padded to the entrance, expecting the delivery of her new desk chair. Instead, she found a man in his mid-30s holding a potted peace lily. "Good morning," he said with a hesitant smile. "I'm Nikhil Verma. I live on the other side of you." He gestured toward the blue house to the right. "I noticed you moved in recently and thought you might like something to brighten your space." Prisha accepted the plant with genuine surprise. "That's incredibly thoughtful." "I'm Prisha Malhotra." "I know this might sound strange," Nikhil said, rubbing the back of his neck. "But I'm an architect who works from home. My office faces your backyard, and I couldn't help noticing you sitting there writing until late most nights. You looked like you could use a friend, or at least a decent cup of coffee." Under normal circumstances, Prisha might have found his admission off-putting. Instead, she felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. "Coffee would be nice, actually," she replied, surprising herself. Over the next few weeks, coffee with Nikhil became part of Prisha's new routine. He was a widower who had lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier. Unlike Vikram's calculated ambition, Nikhil possessed a thoughtful creativity that resonated with Prisha. His designs focused on creating spaces that felt like sanctuaries. "Architecture isn't just about buildings," he explained one evening as they sat on his back porch. "It's about creating spaces where people feel most themselves." Meanwhile, cracks were appearing next door. Through her kitchen window, Prisha occasionally glimpsed Tanya and Vikram arguing. Twice she spotted Tanya leaving late at night, only to return the following day looking stormy. The honeymoon, it seemed, was ending. One afternoon, Prisha was watering her newly planted garden when Vikram appeared at the fence. "You look well," he said, his eyes taking in her relaxed posture, the gentle smile lines that had begun to appear around her eyes again. "I am well," she replied simply. "Tanya thinks you're stalking us by living here." His laugh held no humor. "I told her that's not your style." "No, it's not," Prisha agreed. "How would you know my style anymore, Vikram? Did you ever?" Before he could answer, Tanya appeared in the doorway, calling him sharply back inside. The brief flash of relief on his face told Prisha everything. That night, Prisha opened her laptop and began to write in earnest about her experience. "Living next door to my replacement isn't about torturing myself with what I've lost," she typed. "It's about facing reality without flinching. It's about remembering that I am not defined by someone else's betrayal." The blog post took shape under her fingers, pouring out in honest, raw paragraphs about dignity in the face of heartbreak. She titled it, "The View from Next Door," and after a moment's hesitation, pressed publish. By morning, the post had been shared thousands of times. By afternoon, her inbox overflowed with messages from women who had faced similar betrayals. By evening, a literary agent had reached out about a potential memoir. "You've started something remarkable," Nikhil told her, his eyes warm with admiration as they sat in his kitchen, reviewing the comments on her post. "I just told the truth," Prisha said. "Sometimes that's the most powerful thing anyone can do," he replied, gently covering her hand with his own. Outside, through the window, they could see Tanya pacing on the back porch, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing angrily. Inside their sanctuary of honesty, Prisha felt something long dormant beginning to bloom again, not despite her broken heart, but because she had finally allowed it to heal in the light of day rather than the shadows of someone else's lies. The garden between. "The most beautiful gardens grow from disturbed soil," Prisha typed the sentence, then sat back to consider it. 6 months had passed since her life had imploded and reformed into something unexpected. Her blog, Next Door Narratives, had evolved from a single viral post into a lifeline for thousands of women navigating betrayal and rebuilding. The back door opened, and Nikhil appeared with 2 steaming mugs. "Tea break," he announced, setting one beside her laptop. "How's the book coming?" "Slowly," Prisha admitted. "Writing about your own pain is like performing surgery on yourself." Nikhil nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. Over the past months, their friendship had deepened into a comfortable rhythm of shared meals, evening walks, and conversations that often lasted until midnight. He never pushed, never presumed, simply offering steady companionship that asked for nothing in return. "I've been thinking," he said, gesturing toward the narrow strip of land between their houses. "What if we turned that space into a connecting garden? Something beautiful that joins rather than divides." The metaphor wasn't lost on Prisha. "I'd like that." They spent the weekend breaking ground, their hands working in tandem to prepare the soil for new growth. Prisha was planting lavender when she noticed Vikram watching from his window. Their eyes met briefly before he disappeared from view. Later that afternoon, as Prisha and Nikhil took a break on her porch, Vikram emerged from his house. He looked thinner, the confidence in his stride diminished. "Your blog," he said without preamble. "I read it." Prisha set down her lemonade. "All of it?" "Enough." Vikram's gaze flickered to Nikhil, then back to her. You made me the villain. No, Prisha replied calmly. I simply told my story. You wrote your own role when you chose deception. Things with Tanya aren't, he began, then stopped himself. The investment firm is considering me for partnership. They've seen your blog. It's affecting my professional reputation. Nikhil tensed beside her, but Prisha placed a gentle hand on his arm. I never used your name, Vikram. I never mentioned your company. I only wrote about my experience of betrayal and recovery. You moved next door, Vikram hissed. Everyone knows it's about me. I moved next door because I refused to disappear, Prisha corrected. Your discomfort with that choice is yours to manage, not mine. After Vikram stalked away, Nikhil turned to her with admiration. You've become formidable, you know that? Prisha smiled. I always was. I just forgot for a while. That evening, a thunderstorm rolled in. Through the sheets of rain, Prisha glimpsed Tanya leaving the house next door with several suitcases. The front door remained open. Vikram silhouetted in its frame, making no move to follow her. The next morning, as Prisha and Nikhil surveyed their rain-soaked garden project, Vikram approached the fence. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot. Tanya's gone, he said. She's been seeing someone else. Ironic, isn't it? Prisha felt a complex wave of emotions, not satisfaction exactly, but a sense of cosmic balance restored. I'm sorry you're hurting, she said sincerely. Your garden. Vikram gestured to the emerging landscape between Prisha and Nikhil's houses. It looks like something worth building. It is, Nikhil replied, his hand finding Prisha's. Later that week, Prisha received the final contract for her book. As she signed it, her phone pinged with a notification. Her blog had just passed 1 million subscribers. Celebrating tonight, Nikhil texted. I'll bring dinner. As evening approached, Prisha stood in the connecting garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of possibility. The lavender was taking root, small green shoots reaching toward the light, between the houses that had once represented her past and her uncertain future. Something beautiful was growing in the space she had claimed for herself, a garden built on truth, tended with care, and flourishing despite the storms that had threatened to wash it away. Storms and shelter. The autumn wind scattered golden leaves across Prisha's keyboard as she worked on her patio. A year had passed since she'd moved next door to her broken marriage. A year of metamorphosis. The final chapter needs something, she muttered to herself, brushing away the leaves. Her memoir was nearly complete, the publication date set for spring. The working title, The House That Truth Built, had been Nikhil's suggestion. You're overthinking it, he called from where he was installing a pergola over their connecting garden path. The ending is already written. You're living it, Prisha smiled, watching him work. Their relationship had evolved with deliberate slowness, each step taken with clear-eyed intention. After her experience with Vikram, Prisha had promised herself never again to build a life on wishful thinking or convenient silences. A car door slammed next door. Vikram emerged looking disheveled, his designer suit wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. The past few months had not been kind to him. After Tanya's departure, rumors circulated about financial improprieties at his firm. The partnership he'd coveted had evaporated, and now an investigation was underway. Everything all right? Nikhil asked quietly, noticing Prisha's attention shift. Before she could answer, Vikram approached the garden fence. Prisha, could we talk? Privately? Nikhil excused himself with a gentle squeeze of her shoulder. Once he'd gone inside, Vikram spoke urgently. I need help. The firm is freezing my accounts during the audit. It's just temporary, but I can't access anything right now. Prisha regarded him steadily. What kind of help are you asking for, Vikram? A loan, he replied, eyes darting to the ground. Just until this blows over. You're doing well with the blog and book advance. I know I have no right to ask, but... You're right, Prisha interrupted. You have no right to ask. Prisha, please. I made mistakes, terrible ones. I know that, but we were married for 7 years. Doesn't that count for anything? It counted for everything, she replied softly. That's why your betrayal cut so deeply. Vikram's composure cracked. I've lost everything. The house is being foreclosed on. Tanya maxed out our credit cards before she left. My reputation is in tatters. For a moment, Prisha felt a flicker of her old instinct to rescue him. Then she remembered the morning she'd found Tanya in her home, Vikram's dismissive explanation, the years of emotional neglect that had preceded his actual betrayal. I can't give you money, she said firmly, but I can give you advice. Face the consequences honestly. Rebuild with integrity. It's the only way forward that leads anywhere worth going. That evening, as she and Nikhil prepared dinner together in his kitchen, thunder rumbled in the distance. Through the window, they watched Vikram loading boxes into his car. He's really leaving, Prisha observed, feeling a strange finality. How do you feel about that? Nikhil asked, his voice free of judgment. Sad for what was lost, grateful for what was found. She turned to face him fully. I spent years trying to be what Vikram wanted instead of discovering who I actually was. I won't make that mistake again. Nikhil's eyes held hers. I wouldn't want you to. I fell in love with exactly who you are, not who you might become or who you pretend to be. The simple honesty of his declaration took her breath away. Outside, the rain began to fall in earnest, cascading over the garden they had built between their homes. Through the downpour, Prisha watched Vikram's car pull away, the taillights fading into the storm. She felt not triumph or vengeance, but a quiet completion, the closing of one chapter, the beginning of another. Later, as they sat on Nikhil's covered porch, watching lightning illuminate the sky, Prisha rested her head against his shoulder. I think I know how to finish the book now, she murmured. Tell me, he said. It's not about living next door to my past. It's about building a home within myself that no one can ever take away. The storm raged on, but they remained sheltered, not just from the rain, but from the kind of deceptions that could never again penetrate the fortress of truth they had constructed together. Foundation's spring sunshine filtered through the cherry blossoms that now lined the garden path connecting Nikhil and Prisha's homes. 18 months after moving next door to her shattered marriage, Prisha stood in her living room surrounded by packed boxes. Her manuscript on the coffee table with its final edits complete. Are you sure about this? Nikhil asked, carrying another box to his truck. Your lease isn't up for another 3 months. Prisha ran her fingers over the book cover design, a simple image of 2 houses with a garden growing between them. I'm sure. This house served its purpose. It was never meant to be permanent. The publishing date for The House That Truth Built was 2 weeks away. Pre-orders had exceeded expectations, and her editor had already approached her about a follow-up book focusing on rebuilding after betrayal. The blog continued to flourish, creating a community of women supporting each other through similar journeys. As Prisha carried the last of her belongings to Nikhil's truck, a familiar car pulled into the driveway of her old house, now occupied by a young couple with a newborn. Vikram stepped out, looking different than when he'd left 6 months earlier. The desperate edge was gone from his appearance, replaced by a more grounded demeanor. He approached hesitantly. I heard you were moving today. I wanted to give you something before you left. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter and a check. It's not all I owe you, he explained. But it's a start. The letter explains everything, the mistakes I made, the lessons I've learned. You don't have to read it, but I needed to write it. Prisha studied his face. Where are you living now? Mumbai. My cousin got me a job at his tech company. Entry level, nothing fancy. I'm starting over. He glanced at Nikhil loading the truck, then back to Prisha. I read an advance copy of your book. My publicist friend got one. And? Prisha asked, curious despite herself. It's beautiful. Honest. Vikram's voice softened. You always were the better writer between us. I just never took the time to read what was right in front of me. After he left, Prisha and Nikhil drove to their new home, a craftsman house on the edge of the city with a sprawling garden and a dedicated writing studio that Nikhil had designed specifically for her. What did Vikram want? Nikhil asked as they unpacked. Prisha showed him the letter and check. Closure, I think. For both of us. That evening, as sunset painted their new home in amber light, Prisha sat on the porch steps beside Nikhil, his arm around her shoulders. I've been thinking, she said, about foundations, professionally or metaphorically. he asked with a smile. Both. The foundation of that first house, our marriage, was built on shifting sand. I never saw it until it collapsed. She turned to face him. But this, what we've built together, started with absolute truth, even when it hurt. Even when it was messy, Nikhil nodded. Truth is the only foundation that lasts. Later, as they unpacked books in their shared study, Prisha found the old journal she'd started the day she moved next door. The final entry, written just that morning, read, "Today I leave the house next door, not as an escape, but as a graduation. I came here broken, believing that proximity to my pain would somehow tame it. What I discovered instead was that witnessing my own resilience up close was the greatest gift I could give myself." As night fell, Prisha stood in their new kitchen watching Nikhil prepare tea with the careful attention he brought to everything. She thought about the young couple now living in her old house, the newborn who would grow up there, the stories those walls would now witness. "I received an interesting invitation today," she said. "A women's shelter in Chennai wants me to lead a workshop on rebuilding after trauma." "You should do it," Nikhil replied without hesitation. "Your story has helped so many already." "Our story," Prisha corrected gently. "I couldn't have written it alone." As they settled into their new home that night, Prisha realized that moving next door had never been about revenge or even closure. It had been about bearing witness. To betrayal, yes, but more importantly, to her own capacity for renewal. The house next door had been a chrysalis, temporary by design. Now, having emerged transformed, she understood that true homes weren't built of walls and windows, but of honesty, courage, and the quiet miracle of being truly seen by someone who chose to stay.